But the other thing I wanted to talk about, because I don't want to allow football to swamp all of this out. The Udoka stuff was covered in a way, Stugotz, and we talk a lot about coverage around here, and we don't care so much, it doesn't seem, when people are compromised on coverage. But there were a number of things around the coverage of the Udoka scandal that I found unpleasant and irresponsible. And one of them that made me uncomfortable was Stephen A. Smith going debate show, my show on that topic, on the optics of that topic, as we discuss men in power, men controlling things, men creating bad environments consistently for women, so much so that you don't care that Washington has 13 executives out in the last 18 months because Commanders football is here and Wentz is here and we can argue about fantasy points. But the Udoka stuff showed you a lot of things unpleasant about our business. And Malika Andrews calling in to the Stephen A. show and Stephen A. saying, not on my show, when it'd be decent to listen to people right now, given how many hostile environments men have created for women over time. Unpleasant, with blind spots, because we shouldn't have been trusted with the power. We don't deserve it. We treat it as something that is ours from privilege and belongs to us, and we don't listen when others try to correct us, and certainly not in the atmosphere of debate television when it might be a time to listen. I didn't like falling on the argument tropes when Malika Andrews is trying to talk to you, as the coverage around this is sloppy everywhere.
I think I'd rather hear from Malika Andrews on that than I would Stephen A. Smith, to be honest with you.
Regardless, she was calling in, and look, there was Malika Andrews was calling in and saying that that Stephen A. Smith was partaking in some blaming of the victims. It's not how I heard it, but I wanted to hear Malika Andrews' viewpoint, and it became a not on my show argument, and I just didn't want debate television there. I wanted an explanation journalistically of why ESPN botched that story on the front end to create so many problems, because Woj is reporting a report that is just sloppy in the details that allows the internet to internet. And journalism isn't supposed to be the interneting. There's supposed to be a different standard there, even if it's entertainment television and debate television. And I just wanted, hey, can we have a reasonable conversation around what is happening around Udoka? And what she's arguing for that was so controversial is, hey, we don't have all the facts here yet. How about we get all the facts? Like, that's not a controversial thing to argue. How about we get properly informed here before we go having takes on immediate takes everywhere on something that is really unusual, because a championship-worthy coach of the Celtics seems like should have been fired by whatever happened there, but they chose a year, and I don't know why it's a year. It's a mystery to have a year. We can wait to find out more details on the reporting.
I can also understand why First Take doesn't necessarily take a wait and see approach, given the culture that is surrounded that show, where they have to have a take. And I think that's a lesson here, especially in instances like these. Our takes age gracefully, thankfully, because I work with Jess, and Jess has changed my prism. It's also a good argument for a diverse workplace, to know that power dynamics exist. And yeah, Stephen A. Smith, who's made a hell of a career in giving takes, fell on the wrong side of that. And I can understand where Stephen A. Smith was just, I was giving takes based off of the reporting that I had in my disposal. Shams detonated a bomb, and 36 hours later, some of the variables changed. With the situation like this, you kind of have to anticipate variables changing, though, because of the nature of the story.
Again, though, I don't, man, do you know how annoying it is? I hear myself, and I hear the audience getting annoyed at me with, Dan, really always going to talk about journalism principles? Always going to talk about journalism principles. But when you report the story that way on the front end, that flimsy, Stugotz, because the pressure to be first gets the insiders $9 million and $7 million a year, and they control all the coverage of what it is that you're doing. Do you realize what an egregious thing that is, to have that land on women in the Celtics organization who did not ask for any of that, and flimsy reporting to bring it, because an entity that's in partnership with its teams and league is reporting that way about something, I think the details on this shit matters.
But what do you do with what Mike said? Because Malika Andrews is more of a journalist right now than Stephen A. Smith is, and she wants all the facts to come in, and she's right. But Stephen A.'s job, then, it's a debate show, and Stephen A.'s job is to give a take with whatever information he has.
No, Stugotz, but the take is allowed to be, I don't know sometimes, and I can be quiet, and I can listen here. I don't always have to be doing show. I've seen him fake hockey stuff when he's talking to somebody, and he brings the bombast up to a level when he doesn't actually care about
NBA,
it that
though.
much.
He's going to speak on NBA with authority.
But this isn't NBA, though. This is not. No, but this is an NBA subject matter, but this is workplace that has been run by men for a long time.
Right. That's fair.
No, his point was this stuff has been going on a long time. So he started hitting it up with racial aspects too. Why do we know about this? And the part that Malika Andrews took exception to, which I think in a vacuum, Stephen A. does have a point. Like, you know Udoka's business, and because you don't know the consensual relationship that he had, you've now opened the door for a bunch of victimizing. I thought Brad Stevens got a lot of applause for his press conference that he didn't necessarily deserve. While he was wagging his finger, yes, we all have to be better. Shame on Twitter for trying to dox all these women and dragging all these other women into it. They also needed to get out in front of it. They fomented this environment. As soon as a story breaks, you need to act swiftly with the punishment, and then we leave room. There's always going to be room for skepticism and scrutinization afterwards. But what the Boston Celtics did in their approach after it leaked, maybe there's a reason for it that they cannot say. We had 36 hours of everybody losing their minds with one word: consensual. And all these women got dragged into it, and I think that the Boston Celtics also have a bit of a responsibility in that.
What do you do with Kevin Frazier being among the reporters out there, formerly of Entertainment Tonight, formerly of ESPN, reporting certain details that are, everyone's interested in the mystery of this, Stugotz, because it's scandalous in a way that has a sexual undercurrent. It's not just, it has all of the elements, this story. You've got scandal, you've got gender, you've got race, you have winning, you have storied franchise.
You have a Hollywood starlet that has about 100% rating with Black America right now that is playing into the social media aspect of all this. Kevin Frazier, you said formerly of Entertainment Tonight. I know he's like a co-founder of an entertainment website. I mean, it's safe to assume that there's an entertainment angle of this, and Nia Long has her own publicist and marketing team that's probably putting some stuff out there too, because she's been dragged into this.
But what do I do with reporting on this as we try to wait out details? And Kevin Frazier is a credible reporter with sources, and he's saying, according to sources, he's giving the internet some of the chum that it wishes to have in the mystery that has been welcomed by allowing us into this bedroom with all of this reporting, investigation, and scandal, and the unusualness of a year Stugotz suspension from where? Like there must be stuff here that is pretty damning, because I don't understand how you go, what the next step has to be between a year and fired. I assume lawyers. I assume you don't want to start welcoming all that. You want to give the possibility so that this can quiet down. I assume lawyers got involved because the Celtics know how touchy whatever this is. But what do we say about the details in public, given that it's okay to wait for investigation, for reporting, when a Kevin Frazier is out there giving you the details on how the affair was learned about, etc.?
It's all data for us to take in, and I think scrutinizing some of the reporting is fair. It's still not at a point where I'm comfortable making a take on it. There's still so much to learn. I think the last week has shown us certainly do not rush in with a take in this circumstance. I think learn from mistakes of others. I know David Sampson walked a tweet back. Matt Barnes took down a tweet after 2 minutes after hearing from someone he alleged in the Celtics organization that said this is a lot messier than any of us know, and a lot of lives have been impacted by this.
Why would we assume if it's a year-long suspension that it would just be, what, consensual relationship? What's the big deal? When a year-long, are people assuming in reaction to Me Too that there are going to be over-punishments? Like, are the people assuming that all of these things are going to become political, and that how can you assume that an NBA coach was wronged when he gets a year suspension? What has to happen before that for the assumption to be like, oh, he must have been wronged here?
What we know from the reporting so far, he's been suspended. It was a violation of team rules. He had a consensual relationship, but also 36 hours later, Shams gave us the nugget that it all stemmed from an unwanted comment. We don't know if that unwanted comment was to someone else, someone he was in a consensual relationship with. We don't know anything yet. And people are obviously going to be very private about this right now. You don't have to race to a take.
Also, who is calling it consensual? We don't know who's feeding that word to the reporter who's reporting it. I just don't think that you even need to make a take about it right now. I don't think we need to fill a certain amount of time on this show with speculation about it, right? Like,
there's also confirmation bias, right? Because I think if you see a blue check mark and someone with the reputation of Shams, that's still an opinion, right? Consensual. It's somebody's opinion.
Yeah, but you trust his reporting, don't you?
Yes, which
you trust Kevin Frazier's reporting,
I think a lot of people are learning to trust his...
Not necessarily.
Okay.
There's always an agenda attached, even with ESPN's. Look, every time Amin's in, he's told you where the biases of Woj lie. You don't know where the biases of Shams lie.
What's it going to take for
Sports use unnamed sources for things all the time. It's become a very common practice in sports journalism, and oftentimes it shouldn't be, because if the unnamed source is Ime Udoka's agent or Ime Udoka himself, he's going to have a different perspective on something than if the unnamed source is the woman involved in the relationship, the Celtics organization, Brad Stevens, Adam Silver, any number of other people. And we've just gotten used to taking unnamed sources at their word, and Shams and Woj at their word, according to possibly one unnamed source, who has a stake in what's being reported and how it's being reported and when it's being reported. You don't have to take that at face value.
I'd go a step further here. It's why I keep asking Stugotz the question. And when he says, well, I trust the reporting, and I would say on this subject matter, I do not, because Schefter already showed you what can happen here when he was reporting on Dalvin Cook. Like that there are compromises here being made that the public
Dan, I
doesn't
haven't given
care
a take
about.
Yet. There are certain people I just trust as journalists to get it right and do it the right way.
I'm telling you, I'm
not saying they can't be wrong,
but in this sphere, they've already shown to be lacking, and this is the latest example. The coverage on this was wrong, Stugotz. It wasn't journalistically sound. It's where Twitter and the need to be first shape journalism. Journalism is supposed to start that conversation, not be so infected by the needs of social media to have it contaminated, so that what happens is victims become more victims because we still trust the reporting that is compromised. It's why I keep asking, hey, what do I need to put in front of you guys before you start worrying about some of this stuff? Like, how many different credibility type of things do I have to put in front of you with victims before you start saying, no, it kind of matters that it's being covered shitty?
I also am just very curious how this works now that The Athletic is owned by the New York Times. And I know that they have harsher standards there in terms of what reporters can tweet and things like that. And I don't know if The Athletic falls under their code of conduct or whatever, but to tweet out that nugget, whatever night that was, Wednesday night, and then say whatever it was, 18 hours later that there was an unwanted comment, and then there's still not a full story from both sides or whatever sides about what really happened, feels very, very wrong.
It does. I see how an opinion show finds itself in this trap. There are ways to just report on it. That's not really what First Take does.
But I don't know is not one of the options, right? I don't know, not enough information. It's not allowed.
No, I think it is, but just not necessarily, not to make excuses for them, not necessarily in that culture. And I did, while it was happening, it was a perspective from Stephen A. that was the black man's perspective. He, a black man with a huge voice, especially in that community, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad, according to Twitter mentions. And it was an interesting perspective to apply to why is this different? There's tons of white people in power that have this stuff going on all the time. Why is his suspension as long as Robert Sarver? There are interesting discussion points to be had, but it's not sexy and it's not good television to be like, we'll have those discussions in a month when we have more facts.
But you don't have to be like that. You just said why. Why is it? Now, I understand why a black man would arrive at the conclusion through a history of life experiences.
But also a black man in a position of power on his own very show, which he is not shy about telling you.
Dan, if they want to talk about it, it's because Stephen A. wants to talk about it. No producer's stopping Stephen A. from talking about it.
What I'm saying is, yes, that was the black man's perspective at a time I was not particularly interested in the black man's perspective, because the question he was asking that was the most important one is the why, and we don't have a damn answer to it. So he can't answer it with it. He can answer it with his life perspective.
He was asking the question aloud. He wasn't answering the question. He's like, why is this different? But in doing so, he also dragged the person that was having this consensual relationship, and what Malika took exception to was pointing a finger like, wait, why do you get to be in privacy? Why does a black man have to be out there in public? And that's what I think Malika took rightful exception to, which is you are pointing the finger. This is not a victim-blaming situation. We don't know if she's a victim. We don't know if she had the unwanted comment. We don't know anything. We don't know if it's actually consensual.
We also don't know, Stugotz, when she's calling in to quote-unquote my show. Stephen A. Smith is not going to be told when to stop on quote-unquote my show. That conversation could have been had in a non-debate setting in a way that might not have been as heated television or the awkwardness, but would have been more productive as a conversation. Might not have been good television. And maybe this is part of the sacrifices that get made to feed the entertainment debate monster.
But should that sacrifice be made over a topic like this?
That's what I thought. I thought
Right.
We're going to go debate show here too when we still don't have all the facts, and the question why needs to be answered. And the question why was triggered by a journalistic arm that was flimsy in its reporting that allowed all of us to apply our non-discerning, non-journalistic judgments to the why. All of it. Because now God, the whiff of sex and scandal, Stugotz, it's too much to ask the internet and journalism to behave responsibly around the whiff of sex and scandal. It's going to be jokes, and the journalism is going to get contaminated by the need of social media to have it right now.
And it's not just sports journalism, but it's also entertainment journalism, such
But
that
no,
it is.
yeah, that's
involved.
the thing. Like, it's treated like the same as we treat like who gets the game-winning shot in the last game of a playoff series. Like, this subject matter does not have to be talked about or debated in that way, and it shouldn't be, in my opinion.